say. There's a pain in my heart and it won't go away. Now I know I'm falling deep.
So if everybody could please take their seats. Before we begin our program, just a couple of logistical questions. Please, if you haven't already, turn your telephone to either vibrate or airplane mode. We hope above all that after this program you will stay with us and join us for a cocktail so we can exchange with the great speakers and people present here today. First and foremost, welcome to everybody. My name is Sasha Rubel, and I'm Public Policy Lead for AI and Machine Learning for Europe, Middle East, and Africa at Amazon Web Services. And on behalf of all the partners here today, we're very happy to welcome you to the Merod for Break the Bias, Women in AI. The world's first computer programmer was a woman. Her notes on the analytical engine were used by Alan Turing as an inspiration in the 1940s when he worked on the first modern computer. Her name was Ada Lovelace. The world's first ever real computer bug was recorded by a woman who also developed an early computer program language still used today. Her name was Grace Hopper. In addition to her principal career as a film actress, a woman developed a system that was intended to set radio-guided torpedoes off course during World War II. And this idea inspired Wi-Fi, GPS, and Bluetooth. Her name was Hedy Lamarr. A woman's complex manual calculations at NASA allowed for the first ever USA space flight. Her name was Katherine Johnson. Women have played a central role in technological innovation across centuries. But you can't be what you can't see. Welcome to all joining us in person this evening from Brussels, but also to the many of you joining us online from Paris, from Stockholm, from Barcelona, from Berlin, and more to Break the Bias, Women in AI. Over the next 2 hours, you will hear from leading European policy and decision makers about what can be done to promote a diverse and inclusive AI ecosystem in Europe, and above all, see and be inspired by women leaders changing the future of artificial intelligence as a technology, but also as a sector. I want to thank, first and foremost, all of the partners here today who have made this event possible, notably EU AI Week, AI for Belgium, Women in AI, Women in Big Data, the Merod, the Minderoo Center for Technology and Democracy at the University of Cambridge, BOZA, FPS, GirlLeak, and B12 Consulting for joining forces to highlight the joint action between the private sector, the public sector, civil society, and academia to create a more gender-inclusive AI ecosystem. And I now have the pleasure to introduce our first opening speaker of this evening, Lucia Fiori, who is Director of Artificial Intelligence and Digital Industry at the European Commission.
Thank you very much for inviting me to this event. I think it's extremely important. I really like the title, very well chosen. And in fact, if I may start from the fact that artificial intelligence has now become a technology that is very pervasive in our life, and it's very much present in many different applications. It wasn't so a few years ago. But now it is there, and it has a lot of benefits. We use it with many positive impacts on healthcare, on good impacts for sustainability and the climate and so on. But we know that it carries some risk. And the main risk it carries is that some applications can be of concern because they may violate some of our fundamental rights. And this is because AI is complex, it's opaque, and you may have heard a lot about this in these days of the week of AI. Now, as you probably heard already, we have a proposal for a regulatory framework on artificial intelligence that the European Commission is discussing at this moment with the European Council and the Parliament. And one of the main challenges that we want to address with the regulatory framework is exactly the risk that artificial intelligence can bring. And there is one particular aspect that comes up all the time, and that is the risk of bias, the risk of violating our rights in terms of non-discrimination. Now, the regulatory framework, the day we have to implement it, we're going to have some challenges in terms of finding solutions to check or to make developers of artificial intelligence check if their data sets are unbiased or not. And so we are working on the development of tools to debias data sets and all these kind of very complicated things. But at the end of the day, what is one important solution to limit the bias in artificial intelligence is actually to make sure that the teams that work on the development of artificial intelligence systems are diverse. And the problem is that nowadays they are not. And we need more diversity in these teams to make sure that different angles are brought into the design of the artificial intelligence systems. It's very, very important. But when we look at the numbers of people working in artificial intelligence and in the field of technology in general, unfortunately, female participation is still very, very limited. I see a lot of young girls here today, and I really hope that they will make the decision of taking their studies and their careers into science and technology, because today science and technology is very exciting. It's offering, you can work on very exciting stuff, not artificial intelligence in general, but its applications, as I said, to healthcare. It's been very useful during the pandemic and in many other applications, and then the excitement of the green transition. I think science and technology should really be exciting for everyone. But still, when we look at the numbers, we are progressing, but we are very far. If we look at the number of ICT professionals, and we actually have some ambitious targets in the European Union, we would like to have 20 million ICT professionals, because nowadays, especially with the pandemic, the digital transformation has accelerated, and so we need ICT specialists in all the sectors of the economy. And of this, we would like to have a similar number of men and women. Unfortunately, nowadays, women only represent less than 20% of the ICT professionals. And of course, some areas are affected more than others, in the sense that I work also in the area of semiconductors, and I can tell you every time I turn up to a meeting, I'm the only woman. But I think that more can be done. And I consider this a societal issue, because we have been in the Commission, we've been carrying out for many years exercises like code weeks. Code weeks are, we pick 1 or 2 weeks during the year during which we go to schools and we expose all the young students to coding. And if you look at the numbers, you will see that half of the people who participate to code weeks are actually girls. Then the difficulty is to keep this opportunity open for girls, to keep the girls interested, and also have a society that is actually incentivizing girls' participation to science and technology. I think that today we are talking about AI, and as I said, it is very important for having more women in AI, exactly because we need to address issues such as bias. But it is also important for Europe as an economic area to have more women working as ICT professionals to balance demand and also to increase the numbers that we need. We have such a shortage in terms of ICT professionals that simply bringing women to that kind of workforce is definitely going to increase the numbers that we have to increase. So the last thing I would like to say is that I also hope that universities of all faculties will be increasing the offering of courses in programming, not only for AI specialists, but really in all the different faculties. There are countries in the European Union that have some good programs on artificial intelligence. For example, they offer scholarships for PhDs in particular to women, and they target people who come from different fields. People don't have to have studied computing science. They don't have to have studied necessarily engineering or computing science to become data scientists. They may have studied statistics, they may have studied economics, and they're still perfectly suitable to become data scientists and work in the area of artificial intelligence. And actually, when they have a different background, they can bring even more to the topic. And so we think that multidisciplinarity and the possibility of teaching programming in all the faculties of different faculties will really meet this objective. So all in all, artificial intelligence needs women. The quality of artificial intelligence needs diversity. And we need more women to participate to the digital world because we have shortages, because it should be more balanced. And I think that I really hope over time there will be more young girls who have been exposed to programming that continue with that career, because it's important for the European Union, it's important for Belgium, it's important for the European Union, and I really hope to see those numbers increasing. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lucia Fiori, for your message of hope and also commitment in terms of skills building to build an inclusive AI ecosystem. It's now my pleasure to introduce to the stage Nicole Foster, the Global Director for AI ML Public Policy at Amazon Web Services.
Thank you so much for having me with you here today. Merci de m'avoir invité ici aujourd'hui. C'est un plaisir d'être ici avec vous en personne de Toronto. Artificial intelligence has the potential to be truly transformational, tackling some of humanity's most challenging problems, augmenting human performance, and maximizing productivity. And women are already playing a central role in the development of artificial intelligence and harnessing it for social impact. So I'm thrilled that as part of this evening's event, we'll be hearing from a number of women who are already pioneers and leaders in AI. And it's important to celebrate these groundbreaking women who are role models to many of us, while we also focus our attention on the gap that we need to close. We've heard some of the statistics about the lack of women in this field, but I can add to that that women make up only 26% of data and AI positions in the workforce. Today, women are 13 times less likely to file for a technology patent than men, and the OECD estimates that just 7% of ICT patents in G20 countries are obtained by women, and only 10% of technology startup companies seeking venture capital are funded by women. These statistics were gathered before the pandemic, and we know that the pandemic has hit women earlier and harder, and their jobs continue to recover more slowly. We're familiar with the term she-cession to refer to the uneven conditions that are creating barriers for women to re-enter the workforce. At the same time, we're also seeing labor shortages across all parts of our economies. And so this has been a long-term trend in the technology sector, and the need for technology skills has become even more acute as more organizations have a pressing need to accelerate their digital transformation. Organizations today face a common barrier to achieve their AI goals, and that is talent. And despite the surging demand for AI, at least one talent pool that could help businesses achieve their AI ambitions has remained largely untapped, and that's women. Women are a smart and sound investment, and AWS is a firm believer in that. And the first reason for that is that diversity makes better science. Our teams take a lot of pride in building effective and accurate AI machine learning systems, and diverse teams are better at problem solving and innovation. The positive impact of this powerful technology will depend on our ability to make its design and development inclusive. The second reason is that diversity also makes better business. Companies with 3 or 4 senior women have historically higher success rates compared to those that have only 1 or 2 female executives, and startups with 5 or more female leaders were the most likely to succeed, with 61% of firms becoming profitable or being acquired at a high valuation. So in addition to a number of support programs we offer to startups globally, we also offer tailored programs for women-led startups so that they can start to scale their AI businesses. And one of my favorite parts of my job is actually spending time with the startup teams. It is so exciting to spend time with people who are doing new things and innovating in new ways and building new businesses. So last year, we launched our AWS Aim High program specifically tailored for female founders. This is really trying to address the specific barriers that women face in starting their businesses and they are at the same time leveraging AI and machine learning technologies. So it's helping them to build their technical skills, specifically to support fundraising and market expansion efforts. Adding women to AI and machine learning will bring unique perspectives to high tech that are needed in the industry. So these things are good for business, but they're also good for the world. And as advocates, which I know we all are, for women in male-dominated sectors, we're strategic about building our case about how diversity makes better scientific outcomes. It will benefit our customers, and it will be better for business, increasing the bottom line. But it's also just the right thing to do. AWS is really passionate about increasing technical skills in the workforce, and we have so many different programs to address different types of learners at different stages of their journey. And we especially have tailored programs that will ensure the digital world is more inclusive and that more female leaders are in the driving seat developing AI technology. So far, we've invested $50 million to support the creation of STEM-focused programs at AWS and at partner organizations. We've committed to helping 29 million people in the world grow their technical skills with free cloud computing training by the year 2025. We welcome further cooperation with governments and civil society to support schemes focused on skills development. This is going to be foundational to our economies. The cloud is also an important tool in democratizing access to artificial intelligence. In light of the skills shortage that we are facing on technical skills, the cloud is a strategic advantage. The cloud is democratizing access to AI and putting it in the hands of developers everywhere. Organizations with developers can start to deploy AI/ML without having direct access to expert machine learning practitioners. And with a great deal of humility, my AWS colleagues have worked thoughtfully to share tools and resources based on our own experience to guide the responsible use of artificial intelligence and machine learning. It's this foundation that we build on the principle of diversity. It's a privilege to be with you here for this conversation. All of us, from industry, public policy, the research community, and startups, bring valuable contributions that will bring needed diversity to the AI tech ecosystem. I want to thank our partners that have made this event possible, and I look forward to continuing this conversation together. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicole Foster, for talking about the She Session. I hope tonight is one of many conversations that is part of a She-volution in order to make sure that we build an AI ecosystem that is diverse as the societies that we aspire to create and that we are modeling every day in our homes and in our communities. And in that regard, I'm very happy to invite now to the stage Renaud Vedel, who is the coordinator of the National AI Strategy of France, to share his thoughts as a he-for-she champion about how to ensure a diverse and inclusive AI ecosystem.
Thank you, everybody. I could not agree more with all the statements that have been put forward by my two predecessors on the stage, and I would so briefly elaborate on these. I would just mention that as the representative of the country holding the French presidency to the EU, I also concur to everything that the Commission has said through Lucilla. And the same facts and findings are very put us at an ease in France. For instance, we have set up a new curriculum in high school, which is computer science, and it was introduced 2 years ago. And we are desperate to see that only 13% of the subscribers are women. And it's probably something that is deeply rooted about STEM education. And of course, in STEM education, we have this imbalance, this gender imbalance that has been seen for years in engineering schools, in mathematics, and in computer science. And if we don't tackle it very eagerly, then we will result in a society where AI will be pervasive and will be developed with bias and not in an equal way. So I think we need to tackle this at the roots and very young. I was the other day in Bordeaux at a fair about robotics, and I was talking about the leaders of the local AI scene, which were actually women, and they told me that contrary to maybe a common view, robotics were a field where young women could, in workshops, would participate a lot. And at that age, around 10, 15 years, it was more balanced. And then it's afterwards that then something happens. So probably the answer would be in generalizing computer science at school so that everybody and all the generation would have at least some basis so that they know that it's for everybody. Computer science and of course data science and AI. The second thing is probably also another solution is that we could diversify more the ways that bring to AI. We know that AI is an application field. It's not only STEM, it's not only maths. Of course it counts, but there are lots of other possibilities to go to AI, not only for women, for all the diversity, but I think since we see this imbalance in the curriculum in the fields at university and high school, then we should develop more paths from the social and human sciences, from the legal systems, and we know that AI is something that can be learned by application, learned by summer schools, learned by by discovery, by the chance of meeting, having an internship or something and so forth. And I think this is probably a very powerful way to leverage. And the third way would probably also to develop retraining and upskilling in when people are 5-10 years in their careers, and then they can probably regret sometimes having not chosen that path at high school. There are lots of opportunities there. In AI, this is also a very powerful stream of change. So I think these three, I wouldn't say solution, but three very alternative ways to develop more workforce for women in AI and more training and more talents and more talent would be probably useful to explore. That's what we'll be trying to do in France. At the moment, we have decided to devote half of our strategy to developing skills and talent. So our new, the second generation of AI plan would be 1.5 billion. It's starting actually next week with the first season for developing skills and trainings through public education institutions for subsidies. And this is something that we'll be looking at. We'll be offering special scholarships for studies for women or people from disfavored backgrounds in order to increase diversity. And of course, we will be targeting discovery modules to go and try to convince people that AI is for them. AI is for everybody. And finally, I would like to conclude also that AI will not be only a space for experts. Of course, we'll need top-notch data scientists and top-notch developers. But AI will also be a field where you would have a lot of skills harnessed into teams. And in that, to prepare the data, to curate the data, to mitigate the biases before they are used, and also then on the whole life cycle, as the European AI Act will make it compulsory in critical sectors, in high-risk sectors, it will be very important that we have a mixed and balanced workforce during the whole life cycle to supervise the models, to change the models, to improve them. And this is also an area where probably with a bit less of expertise in terms of scientific, but probably more in terms of acute reasoning and evaluation of the proper consequences, we will be able to address. And so this is another way to attract women in the field also. But I would like to conclude that to say that our ambition must be that even in the expertise field, the gender gap should be redressed and be at absolute parity. Thank you very much. And I would like to conclude to say that in France, we know role models are not enough, but they are very important symbols. And I would like to inform the audience that in France, the Startups Association is led by Clara Chapaz, a woman, the best and the top, the biggest accelerator in Paris, which is the I've got a Station F, sorry, is led by a woman, and also the French Tech is led by a woman. So our best top 3 role models are women-led. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Renaud Vidal. I love how you articulated the question of bias not only in AI as a sector, but also in the way in which we make career choices and the need to start at the root with regards to investment in skills, but also to open up the way in which we look at AI as a sector. And I'm very pleased in the second panel that we have here today, dedicated to women leaders in the AI sector, that they are not all computer scientists or specialists in NLP. They are academics, they are designers, they are philosophers, they are anthropologists, they are entrepreneurs. And this is the vision of an inclusive AI ecosystem that looks at how we can bring diversity to the design, development, and deployment of AI through bringing together different skill sets. So thank you very much for highlighting that. And in that spirit, I'm very happy now to introduce virtually on our screen, Petra de Soto, the Deputy Prime Minister of the Belgian federal government, to build on that message and share the Belgian experience.
A few weeks ago, I visited a secondary school in Ghent, where they launched a project called Unicorn, which aims to encourage more girls to choose STEM studies. And they do this by combining math classes or programming lessons with art or design, or by enabling the combination of science and classical languages. This kind of initiative is much needed since women are highly underrepresented in the ICT sector and they are more digitally vulnerable than men. Recent figures show that in 2021, barely 8 out of 1,000 young women graduated in STEM studies. For young men, this is 21 out of 1,000. And therefore, we can say that there's a big difference between men and women in terms of finding their way into a job in the ICT sector. In that respect, we even score below average in Europe. And this gender imbalance has some striking consequences. For example, algorithms used by certain platforms do not always detect hate speech aimed at women, because these algorithms are too masculine. It's therefore necessary to stimulate the integration of both men and women to ensure an inclusive and diverse digital society. A balanced representation of women in the ICT sector, and specifically within AI, will counteract and eliminate algorithmic biases. The same applies to ethnic cultural minorities, of course. To bridge this gender gap, the federal government developed a strategy focusing on women in digital. And this is a broad social action plan consisting of 5 strategic objectives which are linked to concrete actions. And the strategy aims to ensure that more women graduate in ICT-related studies, to promote the integration of women in the digital sector, and to give more visibility to role models. And where necessary, we will stimulate cooperation with the sectors involved, civil society, trade unions, or the educational institutions. More women are needed to create balanced teams in the ICT and AI sector. And as a government, we want to and we will do our part to make this happen. And my personal message for girls or women aspiring a career in ICT or AI: never ever doubt your abilities. Just go for it.
So never, ever doubt your abilities. Just go for it. This is a perfect message to transition into our first roundtable, and I'd like to invite onto the stage here today policymakers who are making a difference and making sure that women and girls everywhere in Europe and beyond can just go for it. We will have on stage Elżbieta Krausova, a legal scholar and a member of the high-level experts group of the European Commission, Nathaniel Ackerman, the Managing Director of AI for Belgium Coalition and one of the principal organizers of the EU AI Week, Lucy Berger from the EU delegation to the UN, Luis Aranda, Policy Analyst for AI at the OECD, Cheryl Miller-Van Dyck, who is Director of the Digital Leadership Institute and Head of the EU delegation to the G20 Women 20, Bart Becks, Chairman of the eHealth Valley, Chairman of the Euractiv Media Network, and also a board member of the European Innovation Council. Nathalie Smuha, a researcher at the University of Leuven Faculty of Law. Alessandra Sala, President of Women in AI. Émilie Daversin, an entrepreneur and co-founder of VO2 Group and an investor in Leia Capital, which I'm looking forward to hearing more about momentarily. Mika de Ketelaere, who is adjunct professor of artificial intelligence at the Vlerick Business School. This panel will be dedicated to the question of state of play, overview of gender equality in the global AI ecosystem, and it will discuss principally where we are in terms of gender equality globally, and where do we want to go, and what action is needed in order to get there. Elżbieta, over to you.
Sasha, thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. Mesdames et messieurs, bonsoir. Dames en heren, goeie avond. It's my honor and pleasure to welcome you to the first roundtable, which is actually not a round table, it's a half round. But anyway, it's great to see you all here and also you online. And this roundtable is going to discuss really important issues, because I dare to say what we are going to discuss here today is going to change lives to small girls all over the world, or big girls, or even ladies who can anytime join the ICT, change their career, be brave, and just go for their dream. It's not a very easy issue to talk about, because every woman wants to be evaluated for her competencies, not only being a number in statistics. Women want to be unique, and they are unique. So what we need to do is really to encourage them, to support them, and to help them to break the bias that they might have in their heads. That is actually sometimes, and I know it from personal experience, passed from a mother to a small girl who is then thinking, oh, I should sit in the corner and wait for somebody to find me. But it's not that, and this discussion, I believe, will show how to do it and where should we go. But before we are going to go somewhere, we need to identify where we are now. So my first question is for Luis. And Luis, today we heard that actually women are 13 times likely to file for a technology patent than men. The OECD estimates that women obtain just 7% of ICT patents in G20 countries. And your team is actually leading the work of the AI Policy Observatory at OECD. So my question is, can you tell us more about this work, as well as gaps, trends, good practices, etc., that you have identified in the field of AI policy, and that could actually contribute to ensuring a more gender-inclusive AI sector?
Thank you, Betty, and it's really a pleasure to be here today. It's a huge question for 3 minutes. But you know, if you work in AI, you know that gender gaps are everywhere. Like from any angle you look at it, you're going to see huge gender gaps, and we see this in the data. As you know, on OECD.ai, we collect data, we monitor trends in AI in real time or almost real time. And for instance, we see two very significant trends or gaps when it comes to AI and women. One of them is research. So only 18% of AI publications today are authored or co-authored by a woman. So that's not where we want to be. And when we look at AI talent, for instance, as well, we see that today in Europe, twice as many men have AI skills than women. Again, that's not where we want to be. You asked about good policies. We're tracking together with the European Commission national AI policies and strategies from over 60 countries as well. And we're able to identify some of the good practices there. We see good practices coming from countries like India and Bulgaria, who have a history of placing very high focus on STEM careers and computer science, and where computer science is very well regarded by all actors in society, including women. And women see it as a safe environment to work. And then when we look at AI strategies, we see, for instance, the Australia AI Act, the UK AI National Strategy, and the French National Strategy as well, investing large amounts of efforts and money as well into education. And this includes training, reskilling, upskilling women. Some of them target women through scholarships, for instance, apprenticeships, and importantly, industry collaborations. So we do have a collection of good practices there that it's available and open for anyone to see. And I'll just like to end by mentioning that a couple of weeks ago on International Women's Day, we published a report on the effects of AI on the working lives of women, which I think is very interesting. We published it jointly with the IDB, UNESCO, and Cambridge, Professor Jenna Neff, who's here today. And so I would just highly recommend anyone who's interested in the topic to have a look.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Luis, and thank you also for sticking to the time. Thank you for the work that you are doing. It's very interesting, and I recommend everyone to see the work that you are doing at OECD. Now, question for Cheryl. Cheryl, you are the director of the Digital Leadership Institute, a Brussels-based international NGO promoting inclusive digital transformation, recognized by the United Nations for its global leadership in diversity and inclusion in digital fields. Now, you also serve currently as the head of EU delegation to G20 Women 20 engagement group. You are also a co-chair of Italy's W20 Digital Working Group, and you are also chair and president of the Women Entrepreneurship Platform in Europe. Wow. Can you tell us more?
Yeah, go on.
Can you tell us more about the G20 Women 20 engagement group and the role of public policy in encouraging more women in AI? Second question, do you think that programs to promote coding for girls should be evolved to help them become women in AI? And what are the potential current roadblocks that you've identified?
Roadblocks. Okay.
Yes.
I'm going to take Luis's time because I think I got too many questions there. Just kidding. Let me start with the break the bias question. How we're treating AI at the global policy level, at the European policy level, obviously are things that Lucille was talking about. And not only AI, but of course the whole algorithm economy and its impact on women as participants in the workforce, but also as drivers of the digital transformation and leaders of the digital transformation. So there's a lot of policy that are linked to that, but of course we zoom in on skills, of course.
Yes.
And the other thing that I think I would highlight is, since we're talking about bias, I want to highlight that it's not necessarily biases that women have about themselves. So we're trying to move the discussion away from fixing women to fixing the system. And this is one of the greatest challenges that AI poses, is in fact in perpetuating existing biases, namely sexism. But one other that I would like to highlight that I've already heard a lot here today is ageism. So we talk about the future of the world, the future of Europe, and the digital transformation. But actually, this is the present. And to echo the challenge of the she session and the hopeful she-volution, I would just highlight that I don't have the statistics in Europe, but in the US before COVID, 51% of the workforce was made up of women, and that number is now 37%. So that's a very terrifying thing. What are we going to do about that? And if we focus on little girls in school, that's fine, but actually we have to focus on this influx into unemployment that is predominantly female, also from migration, also from all the other challenges that we are looking at on a global scale today. And I think look at the programs that are being run to encourage women towards entrepreneurship, using deep tech, apprenticeship programs so that we can pay them to be outside the home, studying deep tech, working in tech companies, as associates. And I would just like to highlight that actually Belgium is at the very bottom in the OECD in terms of women and girls in STEM. So, and I've been working on this challenge for over 10 years now, and unfortunately nothing has changed in Belgium nor at the European level. So again, the statistics Lucille highlighted, tragically, we don't have not one more woman tech expert of any kind, let alone in AI, in Europe than we did 13 years ago. And this is with the digital disruption. This is with the demand that is skyrocketing, that those roles continue to be taken up predominantly by men. And if we keep focusing on one part of the leaky pipeline, which is generally programs targeting girls, we're not going to get there. We have to support programs that target mature women as well, and I would even argue especially mature women, because we are the ones who don't have jobs, who are driven to economic or to entrepreneurship through economic necessity. And as far as the roadblocks, I can say, like I did, I have been working on this issue for 10 years now, and some of the roadblocks that we've faced are, number one, everyone is a gender expert, so reinventing the wheel. Not going to the sources where we know what the best practices are. DLI has a list of things that we've done that are world-class right in Brussels, that we've launched and deployed in Brussels first, Europe second, and globally in the third place. But it's hard for us to sustain what we're doing because we're seen as affirmative, affirmative discrimination of a sort, or it's political, or we just can't get the sustained support for the programs that we're doing. And I invite you all to come and talk to us and get involved with what we're doing, because I know that it is the way forward.
Thank you very much, Cheryl, for this passionate speech.
I didn't ask for that.
Thank you so much, and I'm sure things are going to get better with your work. Now to Natalie. Natalie, you're academic, but you also have played a key role in the process of several international organizations to develop standards, recommendations, and regulations in the field of AI. You're a scientific expert in the Council of Europe Commission Ad hoc Committee on AI, so-called CAHAI, and you're also member of the OECD Network of Expert One AI. Previously, you worked at the European Commission at DG Connect, where you coordinated the work of the high-level expert group on AI, and you contributed to the European AI strategy. And I guess I will also say wow to every of the panelists. So my question is for you is, on a pan-European level, what role does gender equality play in international discussions and policymaking on building a thriving and inclusive AI ecosystem, and possibly what's missing?
Okay, so let me start with the good first, and then I'll get to the bad. Some good things. I think institutions, all the institutions that you're talking about, European Commission, OECD, Council of Europe, they're aware of the issue. And I think that's already a key point to start with. And they're also in their policy papers, for instance, referring to great research that has been done, especially by women and also women of color. I'm thinking of Timnit Gebru, Joy Bolamwini, on how AI impacts gender equality and how it impacts the position of women and people of color, more generally, people of all kind of diversity. So that's a good point. Second good point is that these institutions are also aware of the fact that they need to do more than just acknowledge the problem. AI systems don't just affect men in suits, so the decisions about AI systems should not just be taken by men in suits. And there as well, I think all of these institutions are succeeding well in having more women around the negotiation table when it comes to actually looking at what needs to be done, what kind of actions need to be taken to remediate the problem. So that's also very good. And then a third good point is that when you look at what these institutions are doing in terms of legislation, right, around making sure that data sets are, for instance, more representative, there are concrete actions being taken. I'm going to take the example of the proposal of the AI Act at the European Commission. So gender is part of that discussion, maybe more implicitly, but the fact that high-risk AI systems will need to take into account the fact that the data sets they use need to be representative and that they need to test them on bias before they start using them. The fact that that is already put into a legislation, once it's adopted and hopefully soon, that's already a good point as well. So I think there are a lot of things to be positive about. But of course, there is a lot of work that remains, and I'm going to point just two things. One thing, and that's especially in the discussions we had with the Council of Europe, I came across that a lot. Even the term gender is still problematic for a couple of countries. One of the countries for which this was a huge problem in the Council of Europe has now been kicked out of the Council of Europe. That's a sad thing, actually, because there are a lot of sad consequences attached to it. But also, EU countries still have a problem with the term gender. So that's a first obstacle, I think, if we want to talk about gender equality in AI. And then a second point is that when we need to adopt legislation in order to have, a representative data set that doesn't discriminate women, it kind of means that as a society we failed, because we need to impose it through law. So law should be the last step, right? When companies and organizations don't step up to do it themselves. And we are now at that last step because it's not happening. And law itself will not solve all the problems. It's going to be the mindset that needs to be changed. And law can help to give that push because there is a stick behind the door. But we need to have society at large work on this issue. And I'll stop there.
Thank you so much for this powerful message and for all the work that international organizations with your help are also doing. Thank you, Nathalie. Now, let me have a question for Nathanael, and also, wow, on your profile. Nathanael, you were advisor for innovation and AI to the French government, and you returned to Belgium in 2019 to contribute to the development of Belgium's national AI strategy. Can you share with us, please, how gender equality has played a role in the strategic development plans in the field of AI in these two countries, and what role you see policy and strategy have in ensuring gender equality in the AI ecosystem, building on the Belgian and French experiences? And a little bit more, what are some best practices that you think could be scaled? Or what national digital upskilling schemes are looking at AI?
In 1 minute.
I'm making it very hard for them,
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Betty. Okay,
Pleasure.
so what I can say, I have had the chance to be the advisor of Accelerator, the State Secretary for Digitalization in France. And she was amazing. And she was conscious that we must bring together not only men and women, but also the startups with the big corporates. And she hired me a Belgian guy, in her office. So she was open to diversity. She was Canadian and French. She was speaking English and different languages. So that was an inspiration. So when we started with the French AI plan, the Francia plan, just before AI for Humanity, Cathy O'Neill has just published her book on weapons of mass destruction. So the bias was the crucial point in the data. And so the women, gender equality, the gender balance was seen through this spectrum, I would say. Then we had to compose the different working groups, so we wanted to have people from the startup, the public sector, private sector, but also women and men. And we see that if we do the effort, we can find many women that will not push herself forward to participate to that. That's how, for example, Laurence de Villers was in the group, because once I called her and asked, yeah, come. But, okay, so the behaviors are a bit different. I can say that in AI for Belgium, we have the chance to have many, many women. So Nathalie, Mieke, Céline, Sandrine, Valérie here. So we concretely do that. So what we can do, simply said, is all what we can do, because we are not good at all in Belgium. We are not good in Europe in general. But when I came back to Belgium, I was shocked, just shocked. I went to the cabinet and, okay, we were 8 men, 9 men around the table. That is not the way I see the world. So, just to say, we have the speaker challenge, so during the AI week, so we have 2 teams, topics that are not related to AI itself. So it's youth, we must listen to youth, and the second one is women. And I'm so happy that we have this evening, this event. So tomorrow night at the closing, we will know who is the winner of the Speakers Challenge. And the Speakers Challenge was every 450 speakers of the European AI Week must, in his speech, give the name of a woman that was important for computer science history. That is an example, but you can do everything what you do, and we have to have, let's say, minimum. We have to force the presence of women in every board, everywhere. And okay, that's all.
Thank you so much. Thank you for all the support that you are giving to women, and it's also visible in this, panel. We are in a majority. Yes, a quick one.
Just very rapidly, we had a remark on intern discussion by Julie Foulon, who is not there. It was her anniversary yesterday, but she has COVID. And she said, okay, women are not a minority. We are 52% of the population, so, okay.
Yeah, so it will be shown later on in AI community. Thank you. Now, question for another WOW speaker, a great panelist, Lucia Bergere. Lucia, you are part of the EU delegation to the United Nations in Geneva. The digital targets for 2030 in Europe's digital decade, whose objectives are set out in the Digital Compass and its 4 cardinal points, include a specific cardinal point on skills development. Can you tell us more about the role of AI and digital literacy in ensuring an inclusive AI ecosystem and what the EU is doing at the international level in this field?
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much for this question. Obviously, digital literacy across all fields, not just in ICT areas, combined with access, and I mean access for women, but also minorities, for rural areas or in developing countries. is absolutely necessary to increase participation. Participation in the digital ecosystem. And why do we need to increase participation in the digital ecosystem? It's actually to generate data. And I think it's already been hinted on that, but I want to focus actually on the data. The data that we currently have is overwhelmingly actually based on man. If you look at the literature that's been created over the history of time, and if you actually put AI to review it, you will mostly get a man-based view. And that's the sad reality that we have. So the data is biased, and it means that even if you have women in AI, and the algorithm is actually not biased, the AI will be biased, as long as the data is biased. So we actually need to find a way how to generate more data and how to remove the bias from the data. Now, you asked me what we do in Geneva, what the EU does. Obviously, we support a lot of programs that help to promote digital literacy and digital skills, especially in developing countries. We work a lot with the ITU, the International Telecommunications Union. We also have some programs as the European Union ourselves. We also try to help women to be more visible and to take leadership roles in the international organizations, because it's not only the women who are in the private sector, but it's also the women to be heard when actually the standards are developed or when the policies are developed. Also another aspect that we do is that we try to review through the different international organizations, including the Human Rights Council, what the risks are related to AI currently. So there was recently even a new resolution adopted by the Human Rights Council on new and emerging technologies, which actually asks all the technical organizations in the UN system to make sure that when you develop standards or when you develop regulations, that human rights are always respected, that you put attention on women, but minorities, and of course all the other groups as well when you develop the standards. So we also promote, for example, gender-responsive standards in the standardization organizations, and try to promote more women also in positions like mine.
That's great to hear, actually. Thank you, Lucia. And it's great to hear that it's also reflected in standards and in every possible way. Now, let's talk about investment in community building, in awareness raising, and in finances. And my next questions are for Alexandra Sala. According to recent research by the World Economic Forum, only 22% of AI professionals globally and only 12% of the leading machine learning researchers are females. You are the global president of Women in AI, a non-profit do think working towards inclusive AI made up of global networks of women in AI in over 140 countries. Another wow. Can you tell us more about the work of Women in AI, why it was founded, and the work that you are doing to encourage more women in AI? And quickly, 2 more questions. What are the current barriers you see on a global level to ensuring that more women are part of the AI ecosystem? And what will women bring to AI that's not there now? Sorry for many questions.
Thank you for the question. Those are beautiful questions and very important ones. So Women in AI was funded in 2017. We are in more than 114 countries today. It's a do tank, and it's very focused on a key mission. Not just bringing more women into the AI field, but educating and giving skill set to more women and diverse minorities into this field, helping them to supporting them through their career path. So I want to share a very personal story. For many years in industry, I was asked to hire more women, and my teams were the best across the board. And I was thinking, why don't I ask my men colleagues? That was the wrong question. We should have asked, what are we doing to create a better pipeline? I started to work with the Irish government. We launched the first national AI master. And after 3 years, we reviewed it, and we were so amazed at how beautiful the program was. But there were no women. So I said, sorry, we have a problem. And everyone was, what's the problem, Ale? So with Women in AI, we took the challenge. We analyzed why we had the problem, few issues. We came back with a proposal to the government, a 3-month program with the basic skills to help a woman to enter the AI field. 3 months, a woman, even if he is between jobs, about to start a new career or a pregnancy, 3 months are affordable. And therefore, thinking with diversity in mind when we design those education programs is very important. The second question, I want to point out that I strongly believe we are looking at the wrong statistic. The gender gap, it's very important, but we are measuring the symptoms. We are not understanding the cause. So why don't we measure how many companies are educating more women in their workforce, are upskilling them? Why don't we measure how many new AI programs or STEM programs? Why don't we measure how many younger ones each one of us can inspire in their career? How many we mentor? Those are the things that really change my pipeline, so that in few years, I can really have the talent. I'm a technical person, I'm a scientist, and I work in AI every day, and I need talent to achieve and to build those products with diversity and inclusion. So I cannot hire just anyone. I need to hire talent. So we need to work with the younger generation.
Thank you for this message. Thank you, Alessandra. Thank you. Amazing. Now, another question for Emily.
Oh.
Emily, let's talk about money.
Yes.
You are a diversity and inclusion facilitator in business. You're a mentor to entrepreneurs and to corporate leaders, and you're also an investor. You're the co-founder of VO2 Group, one of the top 10 companies in the tech sector in France regarding growth. You are also a member of Leia Capital, an investment fund created by 14 feminine business angels dedicated to investing in women entrepreneurs and innovators. The OECD estimates that women found only 10% of technology startup companies seeking venture capital funding, unfortunately. What are some of the learnings from Leia Capital that you can share with us, and the best practices to be scaled to encourage more women-led startups to seek venture capital investment?
Okay. Well, first, there's something very interesting that I'd like to say is that today at our company, VO2 Group, we have 450 consultants. Our turnover this year is 50 million euros. We have not been funded. We are absolutely independent. And I've had the interest of the people since I've launched with 14 girls, Leia Capital. So this means investment is, strongly regarded now as much more important even than entrepreneurship. And that tells a lot about what I've experienced with VO2 Group and Leia Capital. Leia Capital is 14 girls. We decided to unite because we were all seeing our male friends investing and saying, yeah, I invested in that startup and this one, and we just wanted to be part of it. So we decided to unite, and we meet very interesting women. We only have 2 companies now funded by us who are actually working with AI. And there are a few things that I'd like to share with you. First, the projects we see from women are mostly digital project and not tech projects. And this is very important that now media help us and help women make the difference. Media have to help entrepreneurs to understand that AI or tech is where the money goes, not an app or whatever selling website. This is very important because otherwise they won't get funded. And the media also have, and we have the responsibility to explain as well that a project without technology today is not going to be funded or not correctly. And that's it. There's nothing else that we can say. So how all entrepreneurs now must ask themselves, how can I leverage my project through technology and through AI? And AI today is really deep learning. This is what creates a barrier for a company. So, all of this is a mindset that we have to create, and the media are responsible for that. We are responsible for that. I'm a mom. I have 2 young girls of 8 and 12 years old, and I don't want them to have, a wrong idea of what is entrepreneurship today, what is being funded today, and there is a lot of work to do to make everybody understand what is entrepreneurship, what is tech entrepreneurship, what is AI, and how to get funded. This is my experience.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Now, question for Mieke, because I would say she is a role model. She is an adjunct professor of artificial intelligence in Vlerick Business School. Mieke, in 2018, you were nominated as ICT Woman of the Year in Belgium. And you know firsthand the importance of women role models, and you have been public in writing, on radio, and on television with a well-broadcast cry for more of them in the tech sector, and specifically in AI. So what do you see as a key barrier for women pursuing careers in AI, and what role can mentorship play in overcoming these barriers?
Thanks for these questions, very interesting questions. So I think one important observation I'm making here tonight is if we talk about AI, we talk about keywords like technology, engineering, data, etc. I can tell you from a business perspective, if AI projects fail, it's not at that level that works. It's actually at the level of people and processes, having the right teams together, having the right processes that are stitched together. And that requests other types of skills. That requests collaborative skills, social skills, empathic skills, etc. And somehow this got lost in translation, I've seen. Now, I started to think about it, and I'm like, well, why is this happening? And then I realized it's not that difficult. If you compare to the medical world, they've had like 3,000 years to define a glossary and a definition, a language that we all understand. Well, I can tell you, ask everybody of us what the definitions of AI, you will get different definitions. We haven't got a common language, which means that in my role model, what I'm doing is I'd like to be an AI translator, making sure that with my engineering background, I'm able to put myself on the other side of the table. Being able to say and dare to say, I don't understand. I don't understand what you're saying. Being able to be vulnerable to myself, being able to be humble, understanding the other disciplines that are around the table. And I don't see people doing this. And I don't want to be biased myself, but I could tend to say that women are a little bit better in these type of social skills than men, but I'm not biased myself. Yeah? Be careful what I'm saying. But that means also for people that say, well, I'd love to be an AI, but I'm not technical, I don't like to do STEM, don't worry. We need you, because I can tell you with my, the academics I'm working with, these social skills are lacking. We don't have them anymore. We've lost them. And this will be needed, if you want to make sure that AI is successful in the future. So I'm looking for more like AI translators that can be role models, to be able to say in a very honest, open way, I don't understand you. Can you please translate? If we don't understand each other, there's 2 reasons. I didn't find the words. You understand, you didn't tell me, you didn't understand me. So being able to accept the fact that AI is complex and we need to find the right words to translate is my mission.
Thank you so much. And actually, I share the frustration because sometimes a lawyer working with technicians, it's very hard to find communication, but we always do at the end. Now, last long question before we come for the final short one questions is for Bart. So Bart, you worked previously with startups and scale-ups in Silicon Valley and beyond. You are also chairman of the Euractiv Media Network, which is a leading European EU policy network. You are also a board member of the European Innovation Council, whose objective is to identify and support breakthrough technologies and game-changing innovations to create new markets and scale up internationally. So the questions for you are, can you tell us more about the European Innovation Council Accelerator and Business Acceleration Services? And also, what is the impact of the EIC in supporting more women to participate in its network and the European AI ecosystem?
All right. Hi, everyone. I was already a bit humble when I came on stage. Being last in line to speak now, I'm even more humbled. But let me share a bit thoughts on it, and I'm going to add 2 additional points which might have some relevance. So for those who don't know, EIC is European Innovation Council. It's a fairly large European program that is focused on helping deep tech entrepreneurs start, scale, and grow. So it's a 10 billion effort, so it can have quite some impact. I've chosen 3 of the elements which I think are helping in terms of women entrepreneurs. One is that in the structure of EIC, so across the entire structure, there's the implementation now of having 50% of women in each part of the structure. So that is in the board, being jury members and being evaluators, and on our board, so we are 20 people, it's 10 men, 10 women, and it's even 20 different nationalities. So that's already a fairly good start. In terms of allocating program, one of the elements is Accelerator Programs, which is basically, on European level, it works in technology complexity or technology readiness level. When you start, you can get allocated grants, which go from 500,000 to 50 million per project, approximately. And we see there that over 2 years, organizations founded or co-founded by women in terms of success rates have increased from 20 to 21, from 8 to 29%. So it's not yet where it should be, but it's already, if the growth can be going like that in a couple of years, we should be fine. Also in Innofin, so Innofin is a more capital allocation, and there the objective is to do the same for GPs. So for those a bit less familiar with venture capital structures, VPs are, or GPs are, you have LPs, which are investors, and GPs manage a fund. And also there, it's already 28% where the partner or the co-founding partner has had an allocation. So that's quite okay. And then thirdly, there's a lot of prizes. It's prizes which are grants that are allocated specifically for initiatives being taken by women. So there's 50 that were granted last year. It's budgets between 70 and 100K approximately, and that budget, we had a board meeting last week in Paris, that budget is increased again. So in terms of EIC, they try to implement it across all layers, if it's participants, governments, and other. 2 other small examples, because we mentioned Euractiv. Euractiv, it's a European media policy network. We're active in 12 countries, and I asked for the stats where we are in terms of balance. And the good is that we are 90 people or persons in total, but 51 are women and 39 are men. So that means 56%. That's evolution, and I have to say that 5 years ago, there was a very specific element to make that because there was an unbalance at the time. So that is an interesting one. And the last one, because we allocated a couple of times, I co-founded something with 10 or 15 other people called B Central. And B Central is a digital skills campus here in the center of Brussels. Over the last 4 years, we now trained 250,000 people via 30 schools. So there are 15 schools for kids, until teenagers, and there are 15 schools for adults. Programs are like 19 or B Code, or there's 30 of them, and everyone has a female-oriented element. If it's a kid you can code from 5 or 6 is the youngest. The effect is still fairly limited, I see, but there is certainly an effort from everybody on that everybody understand that it has to be done on policy, on company, but also at skills level to make that difference.
Thank you so much, Bar. Thank you. So we've heard actually where we are. You've heard it from our amazing panelists, and now we will have like very quick closing question for each panelist, like 10 seconds. So we know where we are, but where are we going? In the length of like 10 seconds, can you tell me what is the missing piece to make sure that, as Nicole Foster said in her opening speech, AI teams are as diverse as the population that its AI will impact? And I am going to ask each and one of you, and we start with Louise.
Thank you. Well, I think, in my opinion, that the missing piece can be found at home and in early education. I think that's come out in the panel pretty strongly, and with the opening remarks. We're not going to see significant change till we start talking about AI with our wives and daughters, encouraging them to stay, and thrive in the AI field. And I think us men need to be allies in this transformation. So that's the missing piece, in my opinion. It requires a cultural transformation, which is not easy, but it's not impossible.
Thank you so much, Louise. Now, Cheryl, your 10 seconds. What's the missing piece?
I think the missing piece is accountability. I mean, a cultural shift is not something out there. It's something right here and in here. So instead of getting on the panel, put a woman in the panel in front of your place and set real quotas and achieve them. Hire women and pay them what they're worth.
Thank you. Great message. Now, Natalie.
Yeah, I think having allies, so not just women lifting up women, but also men being allies, I think that's important. That's happening more and more. So I hope that with that, we don't need, as much as I love this event, we don't need these kind of events anymore in a few years.
Right, but I will miss those events. Nathanael, what's your message?
Okay, so my message, when I was in France, I attended the launch of Jamais sans elle. And I think the main message is the woman must not fight alone, the men must be there, we must have ambassador for this cause, and that's why we launched the Persona Numerica call for action in November, and Bart, Wim, and so are ambassador for the cause. So it's not only women, it's we are together, and we must promote the complementarity and the diversity and the inclusion and then
That's right. Thank you, Nathanael. Lucia.
So I'm very consistent, and I think that nobody wants to work with a system which automatically works against you. And so the missing piece for me is a bias-free data.
Okay, good one. Mieke.
I'm going to stick to my point as well. So for me, it's not because you're not into STEM that there's no place for you in AI. We need people with social skills.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Alessandra.
I'll say more of what Women in AI stand for, which is educate, inspire, and connect.
Wonderful. Thank you. Emily?
Well, if I was in charge and if I had money, I would hire an influencer on Instagram, because my girls, they are wearing Jordans and they are on TikTok. So I would hire an influencer and I would explain everything about AI and have, you know, maybe, I don't know, 2-3 influencers talking about AI so that little girls can say, wow, that's fantastic.
Perfect. Actually, anyone should do that. And the final message from Bart.
I think it's a bit in line with what everybody says and trying to be proud of it. There's so much great things being done by women already, and I think being role models and communicating that also via channels that are available to everyone, but also allowing or also pushing men to be proud of contributing to that. I think it's everybody together who can achieve it, and being proud of it as a community of it can be a helpful element.
Thank you so much. Thank you all, my dear panelists. You were absolutely amazing.
Thank you.
And I actually see so much good and so much hope for the future.
Thank you so much to our panelists. If you can all descend the stage this way. I leave this panel with a couple of takeaways. I love the summary of educate, inspire, and connect. Thank you, Alessandra, for that. But also the need for allyship, and allyship from women, but also from other men. And then lastly, the need for role models. And we will be passing to the next roundtable dedicated to role models. But before that, I would like to invite all of the wonderful people who have came in a little bit after the start to please have a seat. We have another 45 minutes ahead of us, but would also like to welcome to the stage Séverine. Please keep your voices down. We're going to continue the program. I would like to invite to the stage Séverine Waterblé, who is the chairwoman of the FPS Economy Management Committee, to share her insights in terms of diversity, equity, inclusion, and AI. Séverine, welcome to the stage.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Sorry. It's funny because there is a rule at European levels, Lucia knows it. It's the Vestager rules, no woman, no panel. But tonight we have to move the rule. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we have seen this week how AI is a technology that will transform our economy and our society. While it offers opportunities in many economic sectors, it's also a tool to help us meet important challenges in areas such as health, mobility, or climate change. This is a woman meeting, so the voice is aware of these challenges. The FPS economy has taken an interest in AI since 2019. First of all, by initiating the work to define the framework for implementation of a federal AI plan, and then by collaborating with the AI for Belgium in the context of recommendation for AI in Belgium. The FPS economy has also launched a study on the impact of the implementation of AI in different domains covered by the economic regulation. The main results were presented a few weeks ago. We were also playing a role in the coordination of the Belgian position for the negotiations of the future European AI regulation. In terms of gender, the FPS of economy developed the national strategy Women in Digital mentioned by the minister. The work was carried out in close cooperation with private, public, and associative actors. In 2021, the strategy was officially adopted by all political levels. And if you are Belgian, you know that it's complicated. It was written and negotiated and adopted in 6 months with 3 regions, with a federal government and 3 communities, which are not the same. So it was really a challenge. But it showed that there is a political interest. The Women in Digital strategy has, as mentioned by the Minister, 5 objectives for more female representation in the STEM and the ICT sectors. The aim of the strategy is to act at all stages of women's life by supporting them in the choice of their study, by including them in the digital labor market, and by maintaining them in the digital labor market, by building new images via awareness campaigns, for instance, and by eliminating the gender gap with specific attention to certain groups. In this context, and in line with the European commitment on women in digital, we are organizing an event on the 28th April at the occasion of the European Girls and Women ICT. So it's my publicity moment. The webinar will be organized in 3 different panels. The first panel, education and employment support, will bring together public actors to share the initiative to prepare young girls for professional life, but also Mattel, because we mentioned also that we need to change the stereotype from the first age. So Mattel will present what the toy industry is doing to fight against gender stereotypes. The second panel, career and professional reorientation, will give the floor to private sector such as Google, Be Central, Industry, whose daily mission is to help improve professional digital skills. And the third panel, business awareness, will bring together public and private actors such as Agoria, Accenture, the FPS BOSA, and the Federation of Belgian Enterprises. And this last panel will discuss the efforts to be made in order to raise awareness of the whole ecosystem, and not only of women, because this is not a feminist question. This is an economic question. And that's why I'm here as chair of the Ministry of Economy, and not, I hope so, as a woman. Thank you, Nathanael, that you gave me the floor. So you are welcome to attend our webinar on Thursday, 28 April, from 9 to 1, and you can have invitation from via AI for Belgium. So that was my moment of publicity. And finally, maybe my personal comment. If you ask me why women have to play a role in AI, I will tell you this. If you ask a man what's the main important invention in the world, he will probably answer a car or plane. They are both invented at the end of the 19th century. If you ask me what's the most important invention, dishwasher. Dishwasher. Inviting, I checked, in 1927, so 30 years after. So my dream would be to have a dishwasher that can also tutor my children in mathematics and in physics. So thank you.
So I hope all the women entrepreneurs and male entrepreneurs here today have taken note of a dishwasher that can train children in math and physics, because I think this might be the next invention that comes out shortly. I loved what you said, Madame Waterblay, that this is not a feminist question, that this is an economic question, because indeed it is not just a question of women. It is a question also of allyship and of making sure that these conversations continue between women and men. So thank you very much for the publicity moment of the next conversation around this, just reflecting on what Nathalie Smuha said. We hope that these conversations lead to joint action so that these kinds of dialogues are obsolete, because we will have created an AI ecosystem that is diverse and inclusive. In the closing of the first panel, we talked about the need for role models. And I'm really excited to invite to the stage now a series of role models working in AI. As I said in the opening, not just computer scientists or NLP and machine learning specialists, but also academics and researchers and philosophers and social and human science specialists that are working to change the way in which we develop AI technology. And I'd like to welcome to the stage now Nahia Orduña, a manager of solutions architecture from Amazon Web Services, as our moderator. Welcome, Nahia. With Ségolène Martin, who is the CEO of Quantify and a Women in AI ambassador. Welcome, Ségolène. Mathilde Bras, who is an expert on responsible and digital policies and a member of the Hugging Face policy community. Welcome, Mathilde. Coralie Hébert, joining us today all the way from Israel, co-founder and CTO of MeNow. Stéphane Héloïse Gras, who is Executive Director of Digital Africa. Welcome, Stéphane Héloïse. Caroline Lair, who is the CEO of The Good AI. Welcome, Caroline. Laurence Jacobs, who is the Business Relationship Officer at Agoria. Welcome, Laurence. Olivia Bailey, Head of Brand and Community from Azure Cloud, joining us from the Netherlands. Thank you, Olivia. And Gina Neff, Executive Director of the Mindru Center for Technology and Democracy at the University of Cambridge. Welcome, Gina. This panel will specifically look at questions of role modeling and how we can promote gender equality, specifically in the European startup AI ecosystem. Naya, over to you.
Thank you. I'm very happy to be here today. I'm Naya Orduña, Tech Lead at AWS. I'm proud member of Women in Big Data, and absolutely thrilled to be here surrounded by these role models. So you know me a bit better. I'm a terrible cook, but I'm a fan of automation. So now I cannot cook a rice alone, but thanks to my kitchen robot, now I can cook even risotto. So I'm going to start now with the questions to learn about existing initiatives that promote women in AI and also that are coming from places around the world. And I'm going to start with Caroline Le. So can you tell me something about yourself now that I shared I cannot cook? Please tell me something about yourself.
Yeah, one interesting thing is how I got into the super exciting space of AI, because originally I was already quite interesting and quite interested, and I was studying cognitive bias, but not in the field of tech, more in the field of political psychology, in international relations, security and defense, so nothing to do with tech. And this is because of my master thesis that one startup in the field of voice recognition reached out and asked me to join the business team to develop the segment of defense. So this is basically how I landed in the field of AI and how I started Women in AI a few months later, who is brilliantly led today by Alessandra that you heard just before.
Thank you for sharing. Apart from that, I know you are investor, entrepreneur. You launched The Good AI, I love the name, in 2021, which is the first community of AI startups and talents on a mission to help companies transition towards a more sustainable and circular business. So, and you're also co-founder of Women in AI. So please tell us more about Good AI. What is it? What brings to diversity in the AI field?
Yeah, so this is a project I launched last year. So as you mentioned, it's growing, it's a still young but growing community of 100 plus startup, talent, scale-up as well. And they all have in common that they're using AI to help companies make business sustainably. And this in 5 areas. So everything related to their company's impact on the planet, with a big focus on carbon reduction, their impact on people, the necessity to build circular model, the necessity to track ESG data, and of course, the absolute necessity to use AI responsibly, because you cannot pretend to leverage AI for sustainability if you don't do it responsibly. So to answer your question, how do we basically embrace diversity and inclusion in what we do? Basically, it's in every aspect, in every activity of the Good AI. First one I mentioned, so one of our impact areas is about people. So how can we help companies with AI-based solution to nurture a more responsible, fair, diverse and inclusive working environment? So what we're going to do, we're going to select some startup, let's say in the recruitment area, because it's a very sensitive area. We're going to recruit startups who, next to their hiring algorithm, also have bias mitigation features or bias auditing tools. So this is the first point. The second point is, of course, in our community, we want to have as much women as we can. So far we have 60% of our talent that are women and 40% of our founders that are women as well. So it's great, but we need to do more. And we're also developing some modules and support to empower them, masterclass, mentoring, access to investors, access to business opportunity. And the third point, of course, and this is also at the core of our mission at the Good AI, is to inspire the young generation, inspire young ladies and also people coming from underprivileged background, and show them that by embracing a career in the field of AI, they can have a real impact on the world. So how we do that? We do that through, for instance, events. In 2 weeks, we have an event around how AI can enable a more sustainable supply chain, and we are inviting one of our talents, who is Adriana Bora. She's a PhD, an awarded PhD, by the way, based in Australia, and she's showing how we can use AI to fight against modern slavery in the supply chain. So this is one example. Another example to inspire people to embrace AI is through our job board. So honestly, when I was 18 or 19, I would have dreamed to see that job board. Basically, we listing all the jobs of our startup members, and it's another way to show to students in which kind of startup they could work tomorrow, how they could use AI for good. So I see that time is up. So, thank you.
Thank you, Caroline. I'm now going to Stefan Eloise here. Tell me something about yourself.
So maybe something that most people don't know about me, and I'm happy to share it today. I was born partially deaf, but I learned to play music from a very young age, which led me to become a semi-professional pianist. And I ended up doing a PhD on music recommendation algorithm, and I studied Spotify recommendation algorithm.
Wow.
And I think the issue around diversity and biases in data sets come from my ability to be fascinated by how an AI could hear things that I could not hear, some frequencies or some sounds and identify things that I could not hear or identify. And yet, I also started to feel these issues around diversity and inclusion when it comes to not only gender, but also disability and geography, obviously, which led me to make some professional choices.
Thank you for sharing that with us. And yeah, you're coming actually, you're going to bring us the knowledge from Africa here, right? I learned about when I was preparing this that we may think which is the country with most business owned by women? Is it the country in Europe? Is it France? Is it Belgium? Is it Germany, Spain? No, it's actually Ghana. 46.4% of business in Ghana are owned by women, and this includes a lot of technology business. And I know you are the executive director of Digital Africa, an initiative and a 130 million euro fund launched by the French President Emmanuel Macron. I think you all realize I don't speak French, but I try, Emmanuel Macron. And to support African digital entrepreneurs in designing and scaling digital innovations for the real economy. So please share with us these lessons from African female entrepreneurs that could inspire us here in Europe. And I want to know how much is AI part of the scene in the tech business of the women in Africa?
I think there's a lot of lessons to be learned from Africa, and I thank you for bringing this in this panel about AI and breaking biases. First, there's an existing talent pool of digital talent, in Africa, and this is obvious. By 2050, 35 to 40% of the working population, and population meaning in the age of working, will be in Africa. So obviously, female workers in the digital economy will come mostly from Africa. And I was struck, I used to work for an online education platform that trains to digital jobs, and they train approximately 3 million students every month, and 20% of them were based in Africa, because obviously the courses were free, and it's easier, and due to a lack of infrastructure and the state of curriculum in most countries in Africa, it was, internet becomes definitely a content provider for training and educating. And those, which struck me then is that most of the courses that were followed online were technically more advanced in some African countries such as Morocco, Tunisia, or Senegal, much more advanced and sophisticated than in Europe. So in Europe, let's say you would have HTML5 or PHP being learned by students online, whereas in Tunisia, it would be Angular or Python or Java. And in Tunisia, again, 45% of the students are women. So there's also a talent pool of women engineers in Africa. That said, women founders and female founders in Africa are facing huge problems and huge difficulties. I mean, obviously, this is a global issue, but let's say that Africa is still underserved when it comes to funding capacities for African startups. So African startups now are reaching major milestones, raising approximately $4 billion last year, but only 8% goes to women. And so when you know of that, and when you think of like women in AI doing AI for the real economy, I think it's quite inspiring. And I want to give you like 3 examples very quickly of exciting startups doing AI application and really bold women. One is MedStaff in Nigeria. Vivian is a very inspiring female leader in the tech ecosystem in Africa doing tracking medication for hospitals in Nigeria. The other is Lorry Systems, which is also a logistic platform, like a sort of Uber of trucks in Kenya and in all East Africa. And this woman is incredibly bold because she recruits most female software engineers for her company, employing 200 employees in Kenya. And the last one is Martina from Sena in Madagascar. Martina was a tennis professional player. And at the age of 19, she decided to take the IT school from her mom in Madagascar and turn it into a big platform using AI for training students and microtasking. And so these are women, when you look at it, it's women having like bumps in their career and bumps in the choices that they face, but definitely not embracing, let's say, a straight path to go there.
Yeah, thanks for sharing these inspiring examples. And now from Africa, we go to Israel. So I have here Coralie Ebert. Tell me something about yourself.
Yes. So there are 2 things that I tell myself that I would never do in my life. The first one is going into computer science or anything related to it. And the second one is being a founder and making my own startup. So it worked very good.
Yeah, because you are like CTO and co-founder of Me Now. You have a PhD in computational neuroscience, so it didn't work out what you promised yourself. I hope you do better in other promises. So you also participate in this AWS Aiml program, right, for female founders, which is dedicated to empower female-founded AI startups like yours and build technical skills, support fundraising, and market expansion efforts. So tell us a bit more about this program, which impact had on you, and what are the best practices you think for an inclusive AI ecosystem?
Yeah, so when we joined the AWS Aiml program, we were still in a very early stage of our startup. We had the algorithm running. We were really close to patent it, and we patented it now. But we were really missing in the term of scalability. We had it running on our platform. We were storing the data locally, and when we were in the programs, and we get to a lot of meetings with AWS architects, we get a lot of support from them in addition, to credits. And this really helped us to moving from, some kind of MVP ideation stage to having, ready to market products that, can ensure data security and can ensure having millions of API calls a day and so on. And this was really crucial, for us to be able really from day one and from a very early stage to implement this. In addition, AWS also really helped us in connecting to VCs. Through this program, all of the startups were connecting to over 13 VCs and female partners in it, which we don't, see a lot. So it was a really great, entry into fundraising and entry in the matter. It was also amazing because we had these really great communities of women. I mean, as a founder of a company, you feel pretty lonely. As a woman founder, it's even worse. I mean, even so, Israel is better than Europe in terms of, women in AI and women going into high tech. Still, the percentage of woman-founded company, especially in AI, is very, very low. It's around 1% that apply for grant to the Innovation Authority. So to be in this environment with so many women, it was very inspiring. We also really helped each other, and even now after the program is finished, we are helping each other all the time. We have a WhatsApp group that is pretty active. and it's like really amazing.
I like it. I mean, as women in AI, we sometimes feel alone. I can imagine women in AI entrepreneur like you here. I can imagine that it's good to power the network. So thank you very much for sharing that. And yeah, after listening from Africa, from Israel, now we're going to talk a bit about corporate responsibility and democracy. And I want to go to you, Gina. Gina Neff, tell me something about yourself.
As a teenager, I was a national champion competitive cook. Completely the opposite.
So we are like the yin and yang of women in AI here. Good, congratulations. I couldn't do that without my robot. Good. Apart from an excellent cook, you are Executive Director of the Minderoo Center for Technology and Democracy at the University of Cambridge. You are Professor of Technology and Society at the University of Oxford. You advise international organizations, including UNESCO, the OECD, and the Women's Forums for the Economy and Society. You led the team that won the 2021 Webby for the best educational website on the internet for the A to Z of AI. You have reached over 1 million people in 17 different languages. A lot of your work and research focus on ensuring that women themselves are asked what needs to be put in place, right, to build, to govern, to manage AI. So please tell us more about these initiatives.
Thanks. We really need to be working to make sure that the technologies we design today work for people, all people, tomorrow. The stakes are really high. Right now, we're rewriting the rules of society through the technologies that we're building. And that's part of the mission of what I do. And we need to make sure that those tools that we're going to use, they work for us, they work for society, and they work for democracy. And I see that in kind of a small d democracy, right? Not about our political systems, although that's important and it's been in the news in terms of how recommendation systems and other things might be subject to political manipulation. I really want to see it as how we expand participation in some of the most important questions and decisions that we make. And I see that as how we have these conversations about who's designing AI, who's helping to implement it in large and small companies, and then, frankly, who's using it. And when you open up participation in that way, you start to see that everybody has a stake in these kinds of discussions, like the ones we're having today. So what do I mean by that concretely? Well, in the report that we mentioned in the last panel that I worked with Luis from OECD and others from UNESCO and the Inter-America Development Bank, and my fabulous collaborator, Clemmie Collette. We really wanted to talk about how the future of work for women will change with AI. And the short answer, the too long didn't read, we don't know. We don't know today how today's technologies will influence the jobs of tomorrow. We do know those jobs are changing. We do know that the skills required are changing, and we know we need to know more. And so we're calling for more attention to the reskilling of women, not just for the AI space, but across in many different kind of jobs where we'll see these tools and technologies be put to place. We don't want to leave women behind in the technologies of the future.
Very nice, thank you. Very inspiring. I go now to Mathilde Bras. Share us something about yourself.
Okay, so we talked a lot about music and language. And actually, thanks to the French AI strategy, I was one of the initiators of the first Francophone training datasets, which is quite important because when you want to develop machine learning and AI, you need datasets and you need very qualitative datasets. And this dataset, we decided to call it Piaf, as it for Edith Piaf, which is a nice way to actually give a tribute to all of our artists and the creative way of doing some technology.
Thank you for sharing. So gender equality in AI is also about ensuring broader access of AI, ML, and also democratizing, right, the access to data. And you work for ETALAB, the French government task force for open data, open source, and data science. And you currently advise Hugging Face, an AI community that develops and deploys AI models based on open source supervised machine learning. So please tell us a bit more about these open source models and open data. What is the role in promoting more women in AI?
Thank you. I would say that the conviction that I have and that I developed at EtaLab and now with Hugging Face is that the more transparent the technology is, the more accountable it is, and the more people can participate to it. And for instance, Hugging Face is like the GitHub for machine learning. The mission is to share some machine learning models, some training data sets, and some use cases so that anyone, tech people, but also non-tech people, can understand the potential of using machine learning to optimize a lot of things. And so when you go to this platform, actually you have the availability of thousands of models and data sets, but also we are developing some tools to actually assess and measure the responsibility of the models. And anyone can contribute. So we developed some model cards where you can see actually how people detected bias in a data set and in a model. And so what's interesting as well is that for a company like Hugging Face, we invest a lot in research, and we hire a lot of researchers in a different fields, and this is something that has been said in the later panel, in the previous panel. And so we develop real teams to actually tackle all the issues of responsible AI, which is linked to, of course, gender, but also problems as carbon footprint, which is a problem that we need to tackle as well, and also other bias that we need to go and see. So I would say that the way to actually align technology with democracy, because this is also something we're talking about, is to increase transparency, because the more you have transparency, the more you have trust and diversity, and also try to open the technology and open the field to people who contribute to the technology. And this is how you need to have some people like Caroline to actually mitigate risk in HR, and other people that are also saying that we still have problems, and it's good to share the problems together, because it's with contribution that you also try to link the problems with the solutions.
Thank you very much. I go to our next one. It's going to be you, Oliviana. Olivia Bailey, tell us something about yourself.
Okay, my fun fact is I'm an American here at a European AI Week, and I build European communities and convince American startups to come to Europe. So I feel like I'm very anti-American in that regard in my career.
So you're very welcome here. Thank you for sharing. So apart from being the American in Europe, I know you are head of brand and community at HR Cloud, and a lot of your work has focusing on promoting open innovation. You have built and scaled communities across sectors successfully, and you brought up startups, governments, corporations, talent together to collaborate. And you have been, of course, advocating for more women in AI at the table. So please tell us a bit more about this importance of this multi-stakeholder approach to innovation and any best practices that we can learn from you.
Yeah. Well, to start off, AI to develop needs ecosystems, because AI is an ecosystem tool. So when you think about just the technology in itself, it's the top of the technology stack. So it requires actually quite a lot of an ecosystem to develop on. And then when you actually look at the application itself, it's usually about unsiloing data or simplifying complex situations like with healthcare, making it easier for such a complex ecosystem to work together. Or yeah, a lot of the data management is about being able to overlay different data and see the correlations between them. So it's an important tool for ecosystems, but also requires an ecosystem to actually be able to develop it. And so that's kind of a big importance of the multi-stakeholder approach to it. But a good multi-stakeholder engagement requires trust, and so that often sits best in communities or ecosystems because you develop relationships more than just trying to engage with other stakeholders without developing the trust. And we find that the best collaborations spark unexpectedly. So an example, at Azure Cloud, I actually was one of the first employees to hire in the startup because they saw the importance of ecosystems development. And so we launched our lab Hyperion, where we work with AI startups. And actually, even within our first batch, we already see the collaboration across them. So we have one startup called UbiOps, who's collaborating with Azure Cloud for deployment for AI and machine learning. And then another startup in the batch called Elegon AI is actually piloting on the UbiOps platform to build their algorithm on Azure Cloud. So it's actually, they're all working together and are able to scale faster and better together. So that's one of the examples of why it's an important part for communities to come together. And then in terms of advocating for women, as I think we've heard throughout today's panels, is the importance of good AI means that you need to have diversity. So that means you need a diverse team, so good talent, and so you need communities to find that talent. But you also need unbiased data, and historically I'd say most data is biased, so you actually do need the communities to work with you now to develop the data so that the future technology is unbiased. So yeah, that's the importance of community.
Thank you very much. Thank you for sharing. And very important, all the communities, all the stakeholders, multi-stakeholders. I'm going to continue with this community topic, and I'm going to go now to you, to Laurent Jacobs. Share something about yourself.
Yeah, well, AI has entered every corner of our lives. We don't even think about it anymore. But for myself, I'm quite a lazy person from the start. I can just sit around and do nothing. AI makes me even more lazy because I no longer have to think about what I'll wear tomorrow, what I'll cook tonight, what I'll watch on Netflix. I don't have to think about how I'm going to help my kids do their homework. AI does pretty much a big deal of my writing, all of my translations. It even suggests me jobs while I'm not looking. So for me, I love AI because it's doing a lot of work for me.
I share that with you. I also let AI get me recommendations of what to buy, what to listen, what to watch. So good. You are also the Business Relationship Officer at the Technology Federation Agoria, which is a community of more than 2,000 member companies within manufacturing and digital industries. And you're responsible for 400 digital companies. And you are a Women in Tech Ambassador, which is an Agoria initiative designed to encourage and inspire female leaders, entrepreneurs, executives, experts to work and thrive in the technology industry. So I want to know more about the impact of the initiative. What message will you share with young women considering going into a career of AI? Do you think these AI careers attracts to young women or puts them off?
Okay, so we've got two main goals with our initiatives. So first, we want to put a spotlight on all the women already working in AI and in the tech sector. And on the other side, we want to bring technology closer to women. We want to demystify it. So it remains important to share the stories of women working in AI because they are all role models. And having these examples that partly pave the way for you, it also works inspiring because that way you can set goals for yourself. Because there still is a dream gap. Boys learn through toys, through street names, history classes, and movies that they can be whatever they want. CEOs, scientists, astronauts, tech engineers. Whereas with girls, they're still often encouraged to be beautiful, to be nice, to be kind, to be silent. So making women visible is really important. And having access to the stories of all these women will help creating dreams for women working in tech already. And if you then connect these women through events like today, where you can share best practices, share your stories, that makes it even more powerful. So my advice to women would be just get outside, meet these women. We've got a big ecosystem of organizations working in Belgium, for example, with women, on women, so just get outside. Now, the part about demystifying technology, I want to highlight two things. There are already a lot of initiatives working with youngsters, like Das Geniaal. Those are influencers that post videos on TikTok and Instagram about experiments with technology and science. Or Be Central is organizing free coding lessons during the Easter holidays for kids. And another initiative is one we're co-creating together with two universities in Brussels, VUB and ULB, and we're setting up a postgraduate on IT and digital skills, where students will get an introduction on IT methodologies and the ecosystem on AI, cybersecurity, and the basics of coding, and the courses will be given by professors, but also by people working in our companies, because we want to make this a hands-on course. And why is that? Because besides a lot of technical profiles needed in our sector that need a STEM background, we also need a lot of bridge builders, people who can make the link with the business and the IT side, and that's what we're aiming with these postgraduates.
Thank you. Very inspiring and very important, giving visibility. And now we go to the last panelist. I have here you, Ségolène Marty.
Perfect pronunciation. Last challenge overcome.
Yeah, tell me something about yourself.
Yes, my fun fact has nothing to do with artificial intelligence, but there is something a few people know about me, is that when I was a kid, I was the shyest kid you could ever see. And I like to sing, and I used to sing in choirs. Of course, when you're shy, you sing in choirs. And I started sang and sang and sang, and this passion for singing led me to sing in front of thousands of people alone in international festivals, and thereby fighting my fear of speaking in public. So a few years ago, you could have never seen me speaking in front of you, but thanks to music, so we heard a few times about music tonight, you know, you can achieve wonderful things.
Great, so if you are fear of public speaking, go to a choir, sing, and then you face
This is a good recipe, so for those of you who are interested, yeah.
Thanks for sharing this. Well, I know you are an expert in the global partnership of AI, and you're also a CEO and co-founder of Quantify, a startup specialized in developing artificial intelligence solutions for human health with a focus on medtech and drug discovery. So basically, you are in fields where the women are underrepresented. So please share with us some challenges that you face and how you overcome them.
Yeah. So first of all, as an entrepreneur, when I hear about challenges, I hear about opportunities, or at least about problems that perhaps I can help find solutions to. And in the field of AI and medical, which is the field in which I'm active, there are several challenges, of course. The first one, I think that as a woman, perhaps I have a special interest or awareness too, is that the issue of bias in the medical field. So of course, in the field, for example, of automating diagnosis, you don't want an algorithm reproducing some biases that are in the data and making, really making a wrong diagnosis because of some biases. So in our team, we have really a special dedication to avoiding there is bias in the models that we develop. So this is the first thing. The second thing is on ensuring that we try to tackle and we help to participate in tackling the fact that there are some diseases that affect women in particular that are not the object of more funding or a lot of funding and a lot of attention of the research community. And we try as much as we can to focus on these diseases, not only, but as one of our priorities. And as an example, I can speak about endometriosis and breast cancer. The last thing, which is not related to the medical field, is that, of course, one of the challenges when I started as the CEO of an AI company here in Belgium is that I looked around me. There was a launch of AI for Belgium. We were not here yet, Nathanael. A few years ago, there was a crowd of men. I was the only one. It has changed, fortunately, since then. But as an entrepreneur, I think that I have the possibility to help show that women can be in that field and perhaps can build different models. So for example, and I will stop here, one of the core values of the companies, of my company and of my team and my colleagues then, is diversity. And every now and then, we go back to our values, we look at our values, and diversity is always here. And even if, of course, we have many male colleagues, because it's hard to recruit women, these male really respect these values and promote this value in the company. And
I like it, like as diversity as core value of the company. Okay, so thank you very much. I mean, I remember Nicole saying in the keynote first that only like 26% of women are in data and AI, like women entrepreneurs. We know it's even like shorter. So it's just a privilege to be here with you. So I would like just before we leave that you share in like one word, a couple of words, what advice would you give to your younger self, but actually inspired by what I heard in the first panel, also to a mature woman that wants to go into AI? So let's start with you, Mathilde.
All right. I think I would advise my younger self, or even my sister, to not be afraid of asking the tech people to explain the technology, so that we can also identify and talk about everything that is inside and how we can actually improve it. So ask for transparency, and it actually applies to a lot of public policies, not only AI, a lot of public policies that are impacting women.
Nice, thank you. Then you go next?
Yes.
Let's go.
So I think what I would tell my young self is, you don't need to be a nerd. You don't need to be, a big fan of computer games that know how to turn out the latest app and, not restart the computer when it crashed, to go into AI and to be like a talented algorithmic developer. And when I saw from high school what happened, all the people that went to study computer sciences were also people that were, passionate with video games. Even so, developing algorithms and playing video games has nothing to do with one another. And I think that's also one of the reasons why we have this huge bias right now.
So you don't need to be the nerd who likes to fix computers. Thank you. Ségolène.
Yes, I think it's a very good time to be a woman in AI. And for those of you who think about it and hesitate, it's really, men or women, fantastic industry to be active in.
Gina?
I would say the future needs you. It needs all of us.
Exactly. Thank you. True. Let's continue here.
Two things. One, don't be afraid of embracing anything you want, because there's no such thing as a gendered type job. And two is surround yourself with balanced teams, and in your management, always seek to have female and male in relating to what I just said. Like there's no job for women and job for men, and that should apply to how you build your team and
no gender in the role. Thank you. Caroline?
I would say follow your inspiration, and if you lack confidence, surround yourself again by powerful women and men that went through the same step as you're doing.
Surround yourself. I like that. Olivia?
Yeah, mine would be don't be silenced and ask a lot of questions. I think when you ask questions, you learn way more, and you find you discover new things for synergies to collaborate. I think I asked a lot of questions and somehow ended up in AI. Certainly didn't plan it.
Thanks, and finally, Laurent.
I would say study whatever you find interesting, because there is always a possibility to make the translation towards tech and AI.
Okay. Thank you. So thank you very much. Please a round of applause for this woman.
Thank you very much to all the very inspiring panelists. We kicked off this evening talking about how you can't be what you can't see. But very clearly today in this panel, we have seen inspiring women working in AI. We have seen the allyship in He4She champions that have spoken about inclusive AI policies and work. And I'm very pleased to now pass the floor to one of our local He4She champions, Wim de Walle, who will give some key takeaways in terms of the follow-up to this event. Wim de Walle, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. For the life of me, I cannot imagine why I was asked by Nathaniel to do this. But it's probably because I tick the 7 boxes, and I'm not sure who in this audience knows of that book. It's called Zeven Vinkjes in Dutch. It's by a Dutch journalist, Joris Luijendijk. And it's about how people who tick the 7 boxes dominate the worldview in Holland, but it's very similar to, I think, our situations. And the 7 boxes are: you're white, you're male, you're highly educated, you're a native speaker, you're heterosexual, you live in the cities, and your parents were highly educated as well. Those are the 7 boxes. It's 3% of the population in Holland, but to quote the author, it's also the king, the prime minister, the 3 last managing editors of our biggest paper, and 100% of the startup managers. That last one isn't true, right? Because we saw it can be different. But I do belong to that 3%. And I also belong to a generation, as you can tell, I'm already on the older side, that in the 80s and the 90s, I was a strong believer in the meritocracy that Silicon Valley was implementing in our industry. I strongly believed I worked in an industry where it didn't matter where you came from, what color you were, what sex, what background, what social class, that it was because you're smart, you were going to make it. And I also believed in tech neutrality, that, we were building technology, but that didn't really, at itself, that was a means to achieve the objectives that we as a company want to achieve, but also progress society. I was a techno-optimist 100%, and also not really aware of biases in my industry and in my environment. But as I grew older, I basically grew, hopefully, a little bit wiser, and I knew they were there then, and they're still there. I have a daughter that is now doing a PhD, but when I was the CEO of iMinds, which was a research center here that's now part of IMEC. She graduated from secondary school, and she had a very analytical mindset, so I really would have loved her to do engineering and do something in the field that I was active in. Not that I tried to push her, but I had to do a speech to candidate students for engineering, electro engineering and software engineering at the University of Ghent. So I went to do a speech there, and I asked my daughter to join and to see maybe that she might be interested, or I could convince her through my speech. And it was a speech about, how technology really impacts our society, how it's not about technology push, but about really solving societal economic problems. And afterwards she said, well, it was a great speech, that I really loved it, this and that, but I'm not going to do it. I looked around. I was the only girl. There were 2 more girls, and there were 60 boys there, right? And frankly speaking, they all look pretty boring. That's basically what she said. And I didn't talk her into it. She did biomedical science and such, still science, but not engineering, not software engineering. And it's a cultural issue that we definitely have on top of the STEM in our engineering, with too much engineering push. And I want to echo the words of Mieke in the first panel. We're not solving this world's problems by just engineering and technology. We need to put multiple disciplines together and multiple views of the world in our teams, in companies, at university, in education. And when we break down those barriers, we will also break down a lot of the barriers that have to do with how you think, how men think, how women think. And when we can move towards such a world where we actually look at that, at solving problems in that way, at an education like that, and at society, I believe we can be optimistic. I also believe that in that world, leadership is not about hierarchy and machismo and top-down management. It's about team management, about working together, and at least in my experience, the female leaders I've worked with were most of the time better than men at doing that. Now, that's all good and well. The awareness grew over the years, but you also have to act, right? Because in the end, it's in little steps, in everyday steps, that you make progress in making this a more diverse society, but also sector. And I recently had the opportunity to join a team of entrepreneurs to build a venture studio in AI and responsible AI and data called Miles Ahead. We called it Miles Ahead not because we think we're miles ahead of the rest of the world, but it refers to a jazz album by Miles Davis. And if you think about what good teams do, it's very similar to good jazz, or music was mentioned a lot here. But if you think about that context where Miles Davis grew up and showed his talent, if you want to know what discrimination is, you have to look at how black jazz musicians were treated in the 60s in segregated America. Now, the talent came out, and that's true for, I think, most talent, but it can be tough. But at that point in time, we also said, and that's what I mean with you have to act, the CEO, the general manager of our studio, needs to be a woman. It just has to be a woman. Not we should also look if we can potentially find a woman. No, we said we need to find one, because there are plenty of women who can do it, and we found one. I think she's here. I'm not sure if she's here, but anyway, we found a woman to do it, and we found multiple good women to do it. It's just you have to basically make the step, and I think a lot of organizations are doing that. So I believe there's cause for optimism. Things are evolving. My daughter is now doing that PhD abroad, in a university abroad. My mother didn't even get to go to higher education, although she was just as smart as my daughter was. I want to end this, it's a bit cliche, but it's like a hopeful message with a quote. I always listen to Nathaniel, but not completely. So I didn't use a quote from somebody who's in the industry, but I want to actually close by quoting a French writer, a feminist, and a politician, actually. I could choose between two Simone de Beauvoir or Simone Weil. I chose for the latter one because of the French presidency we have. And she, well, they're both French, by the way, but she said, I'll do it in French and then in English, ce monde est la porte d'entrée, c'est une barrière, et en même temps, c'est le passage. The world is the closed door, it's a barrier, but at the same time, it's the way through. I think I couldn't have said it better. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Wim de Walle. And now to close us off before I give some official closing remarks, and she is the only thing standing between the audience and wine, so I know she's going to be very inspiring. Dr. Sally Eves, CEO of Aspirational Futures.
Thank you, everyone. I won't be too long either. I know everybody's keen to get over there, but honestly, what an amazing day, what an amazing evening. I think the power of community, the power of partnership has really come to the fore for me today. And I've just put together a few little thoughts about what's resonated most for me. Firstly, I want to say it's time. It's time to change the narrative in so many ways. You know, what a tech career looks like, what a tech career in AI looks like, what an entrepreneur looks like, what a tech-funded project can look like too. So many different ways. And how do we do that? How do we break down how to change this narrative? Firstly, I want to say it's about language. That came up in one of the panels, you know, what the definition of AI is. Also, though, what the definition of a data scientist is. Also, you know, in related fields, security, we talk about zero trust. We also talk about terms like digital native, but also we don't necessarily unpack what that really means, and that can affect a lot of different people. Also, communication matters. We need to reach people where they are, you know, whether that their home is on LinkedIn or Twitter, whether it's on TikTok or somewhere like that too, or Instagram stories. Reach people where their content home is, because that can really help them to be curious and be inspired. It also comes down to education, and it comes down to skills, and that's skills access. Nicole there did some amazing talking earlier about the work with AWS. You know, partnerships with business and education, partnerships with big business and startups can make a huge difference. But also, I want to say it's also about skills confidence as well, that ability to apply them, that self-belief. And for me, that comes down to STEAM skills, you know, tech skills, but alongside creativity, curiosity, emotional intelligence. Skills like that matter too, can make a huge difference to people and can transform their lives. And I also want to mention metacognition, because that helps people to learn smarter, understand their learning style, and apply it in different ways. So again, we need to invest in that. I also want to mention mentoring. It's come up a lot today, and we need to go beyond that to sponsorship as well. Reach out, you see someone who can do a great job, be on a panel, mention it, be active about that. That can make a huge difference too. And I also want to mention some opportunities. So I run something called 365. That's about visibility of role models in tech. And you can be an 8-year-old, you could be an 80-year-old. Whatever you're doing in your community, we showcase it. It's about making visibility of role models relatable to you and where you are. You want to be involved in that, please reach out. Also, there's something called a STEAM scholarship we're running with Aspirational Futures. So again, if you think that can make a difference to you or someone you know, please get in touch. And finally, I want to say about measurement. Again, it's come up a few times today. I'm doing something called the Social Impact Index, and that's trying to directly address some of these challenges we've talked about and looking at where companies are making a difference, showcasing that, and how people make conscious consumerism choices, and also education choices too. So my message is, let's create a contagion of positive change. Let's come together, let's do it today, and let's start now. Thank you, and get a drink.
Thank you so much, Sally, for those inspirational closing remarks. Let's start now working together, working side by side, men and women of all ages, to build this diverse and inclusive AI ecosystem. Before officially inviting all of you to exchange more informally and build these kinds of coalitions, I just want to highlight that teamwork makes the dream work, and we are only as strong as the members of our team. And I want to thank the members of our AWS team, but also the team of all of our partners that have been part of making this event happen today. I want to thank the EU AI Week, AI for Belgium, Women in AI, Women in Big Data, the MEROD, the Minderoo Center for Technology and Democracy at the University of Cambridge, BOZA, FPS, Girl Leak, and B12 Consulting for joining forces to highlight the joint action needed to create this gender-inclusive AI ecosystem. I want to thank the speakers and panelists, but I specifically want to thank the team that has made this happen. So Nathaniel Ackerman, Alexander Vika, Alain Debray, and Ségolène Martin, Stéphane Ducable, Arnaud David, Sophia Trenner, Alia Ilias, Abby Jones, David Pincott, Sébastien Morel, Julie Guichard, Annunciata Gobi, Merav Ash, Ségolène Dessertine-Panard, and Nahia Ordunia, but also our tech team, Alain, Alexandre, Jonas, Fabricio, Rémi, and Soluche. The MEROD team, who have been extremely generous in hosting us, Louis Dorsan Van Cullen and Maite Herkins. And last but not least, two fabulous women in tech who, without this and their tireless work, this entire event would not have happened. Caroline Van den Plas and Tana Tower. Thank you very much for all of your incredible work to make this happen. And then last and not least, thanks to all of you here today in the room, and I hear hundreds and close to 1,000 people participating online right now who have joined this conversation. We see this dialogue as a beginning, not as an end to the cooperation going forward to build this gender equality in an AI ecosystem. And we look forward to working together and making that a reality side by side with all of you. So now it's my pleasure to invite you to have a glass of wine and build these allyships and coalitions by sharing a drink and some food with one another. Thank you very much to all of you.